I'm here to talk about what I do for soil health, I guess, and the first thing I do is question why you're listening to me. If anybody who talks about cover crops and has a head like this, I don't know if we know what we're doing. Anyhow, I've been, like Mel said, playing with cover crops for quite a while, and I've drifted into the last 6 years into strip till, reduced till. I still do a little bit because I grow sugar beets, and it's hard to avoid tillage, but I'm getting that down to a bare minimum as well. And I'll just go through what I'm doing, how I'm doing it a little bit, and I would just as soon answer questions and stand up here and talk about myself. So I do a lot of multi-species after manure. I like to get my manure out. I also have a hog finishing operation, so I like to get my manure out after wheat. It tends to be drier. It's just a nice time to get. I have time. Plant multi-species. I've been playing with different combinations and different species. One of my favorite is sunflowers, and it's almost in every mix. It's in the mix now all the time. I've got, there's some, I'll get into it later, but I do have some disasters and things that really didn't work well and precautions. And I do, when I don't have manure in the system, I still use red clover. I like red clover, it works well. I can usually get a catch. What I'm doing with that now to keep things growing at all times or something green growing at all times, I guess, is I band spray the red clover. It's an old sugar beet band sprayer I have. Doesn't quite require that much horsepower, but that's what drives straight. And I'll terminate a small strip, and I'll strip till that. I'll come into my strip till machine. I'll put down my nutrients that I need for that year, or for that crop, the next crop, I guess. And I'll leave the balance of that red clover till spring and terminate it. So just ahead of the planter, I'm in there with a sprayer, kill off the red clover and plant the corn. I do the same thing with my multi-species. I terminate a strip and come in with my strip tiller. I don't necessarily put any nutrients down because of the manure. I've grown corn on nothing but manure applied the previous year. The reason I do this is I'm not convinced that planting corn and sugar beets, this field is actually destined for sugar beets, is wise in a green mat. I'm not sure it's the thing we should be doing yet. I'd love to see more research on that. So this gives me a little bit of a security blanket, if you will. If the cover crop gets away on me, or if I get wet weather, I've got a strip there that I can deal with my equipment, my planter. So that's that same field. It's not quite terminated yet, or dying, but it has been terminated. Planter's gone through. That's planting sugar beets into that strip. So it's small seed, and it gives me a lot of benefit of. With the strip till machine, the equipment, the harvesting equipment carries much nicer in the fall. There's less ruts, less issues in general with the harvesting process. That top picture there, that's the picture of sugar beets in that field where the planter was in the previous picture. The residue is all gone by June. It was my second best crop of sugar beets that I've ever grown, whether conventional or strip till, so I'm happy with the system. The lower picture is that picture that I had earlier with the strip tilled clover. I'm standing right at a division. I did a nitrogen trial in there. There was 15 pounds with the planter, and then there was zero side dress, 75 pounds and 150 pounds. And I'm not sure if you can pick out the difference between 0 and 75 there. Economically, I should say yield-wise, the 0 did cost me bushels, but if I pencil back the application cost and the cost of nitrogen. There was no economic loss to actually using no nitrogen. This is what drives the neighbors nuts. After sugar beets, my only option for cover crop is cereal rye. And what I'll do is I'll spread the cereal rye right behind the harvester, light tillage pass to level the field. It's one of the few tillage passes I do. And I leave that cereal rye till spring, and I don't touch it until I go through with the planter. And I usually follow that up with a roller to put it down on the ground. It just eliminates any light competition. And I have actually, one of my oh shit moments was putting on too much cereal rye. This was, that wasn't that particular picture. I haven't got a picture of that. But it was 90 to 100 pounds of cereal rye. It was early harvest sugar beets. It took right off. And I planted through cereal rye as high as the box on the planter, and it was a thick mat. Laid awake a couple nights. I think Ann came out to look at it and knew how nervous I was about it. But they did wiggle themselves through. You can see, I don't know if I can find the pointer on it. They did finally roll through, and that's a picture of it after the bottom there in the corners was after the planter left the field. It was, compared to the no-till, it's not a fair comparison, but the no-till beans that were beside that field in the corn stalks lagged about 5 bushel. Dried up that summer, and they had enough cover there that it conserved some moisture. The other thing, when you're doing something like this, cereal rye has an incredible ability to suck a lot of moisture out of the ground, and I was planting into dry ground at that point. The good thing is it didn't take a lot of rain to bring the beans up. And that's a little farther down into the season, and they do eventually make it. You lose a few hair follicles thinking about it. And that fall after the combine went through, I still had a residue mat from the cereal rye, which I love this because after sugar beets, I really have no residue left on the soil. So it's helping me deal with a specialty crop and still maintain a little bit of solid soil quality. The other thing I've been playing with is interseeding. I still haven't got the answers figured out to all of this. Usually annual ryegrass, I'm mixing some clovers in with it. It's been an evolution. Started off with spinner spreaders, herd seeders, went to this little thing. It cost me $600 in a case of beer. I still owe the guy the case of beer. And it's sitting in the back of the shed now. I'm going to try double disc, a 3-point hitch double disc opener drill to see if I can get better soil to seed contact. Maybe cut back on the seeding rate as well. So that's what it looks like. The top picture is in the middle of summer, and as the leaves drop in the fall, it starts to grow. So it's not very competitive. And the following spring, I'll terminate that. That's what it looks like behind the combine, about a week after the combine's gone through. But in the spring, I'll terminate that with a great deal of respect. I have a great deal of respect for annual ryegrass. I don't mess with it. When it's time to spray that, it's time to spray. I don't cut the rates. I don't mix other chemistries with it. If you don't get it the first time, it just gets mad and just gets tougher to kill.
You said cereal rye and annual rye?
Sorry, this is annual rye. The cereal rye is after sugar beets. This is a little picture. This is when 10 or 12 years ago when I first started maybe playing with cover crops a bit more after manure, and it's one of the reasons that I started to go to blend more so than a single species. This was injected manure, a little more soil disturbance back then. had to do a tillage pass to level it, spread the cover crop on, and just for the heck of it, in the last couple of rounds with the spreader, I threw in mustard. And I didn't get rain, so it was a dry August. I had very little cover crop established. You can even see bare soil there between where the tillage was. There was cereal rye, there was radish in there were sunflowers in there, sorghum Sudan, I believe. And I had very little establishment. And then I threw the mustard in just for the heck of it, and it required very little rain. It germinated on a 1/4 inch of rain. And so the train of thought was that if you have a diverse seed size, diverse species in your mix, one of them is going to survive depending on the weather conditions. So it's one of the early lessons. The other thing is with multi-species, these pictures, there's a whole series of screw-ups in there. One is you feed radishes, sunflowers, and some of these other species hog manure, they really grow. They were as high as the hood of that tractor, and I'm going, oh crap, now I'm going to deal with this. First attempt was at the bottom. I rented a flail mower, and you want to eat fuel. You pull that through 6 feet of cover, or 5 feet of cover crop, and you get a mat of goo. Thought about it, went back out the following year. You'd think I'd learn, but the following year, and built a small roller to deal with it, which works well. It's gotten me out of a few jams now. But what I've taken from this is you don't need a incredibly thick stand. So thinner is almost better than too thick. Understand the species that you're growing and what they're going to do, especially if you feed them hog manure. If you're not going to feed them, then you have to look at other considerations, like up the legume rate, and otherwise you end up putting nitrogen on with them. Otherwise you get really a poor stand or poor growth. But there's always, so if you're going to put cover crops into your system, I'd suggest that you understand what the species are going to do. Are they going to win or kill? Are they going to cause you residue issues in the spring? How are you going to deal with that? There's just a lot of things that you probably should think about and understand how it's going to work before you go on large scale cover crop. And I know it was brought up today earlier, one of my other favorite reasons for putting sunflowers in, they don't show up well, but there were 7 different bugs crawling around in there. One of them being a bumblebee at the top, and there was a couple other wild bees in there and a few other things. So there's a few species I've been putting in the blends just to, I don't know, do my thing to feed the wild pollinators. And that's essentially how I'm dealing with my soil, what I do.
We could take a few questions right now. Yep.
What's your organic matter now that you've been on cover crops, and how does it compare to your neighbors who doesn't use cover crops?
I don't know if I have a measurable change. I float between 2 and 3, depending on where I am in the farm. I don't know if I can measure the difference yet over 6 or 7 years. And when I first started, not every acre saw cover crops, so I think this is a long-term deal before you could actually start to measure differences.